Welcome back, everybody. Got another exciting episode of Energy Bites. I've been looking at our transcripts, and we say exhilarating almost every time. So I'm going to switch it up with exciting. Another hyperbole to throw in there.
The thesaurus.
This is not brought to you by ChatGPT, even though it may sound like it is. Here we are, guys. Appreciate our guests today, John and Josh from Welldatabase, coming on and chatting with us. How you guys doing?
Good. How you doing?
Doing good, man. Thanks for having us on, man.
Yeah. Excited to have you here.
We are. We
been trying to get this for a while.
Yeah,
mainly my fault, but
finally got schedules all aligned. But John's off living in the mountains, and Josh is still almost an hour away, even though he's in the same town as us in the woodlands. But
that's what I was gonna say. It's no different. It takes him as long to get there as it takes me.
Yeah.
You fly into IAH and he drives him around.
Yeah, it would probably be faster to come here from Bush than it would be from the woodlands. I guess. Oh man.
Oh yeah.
Anyway, how you doing, Bobs? You good?
Yeah, I'm great. Life's good.
Yeah. Bobby's swatting away all the Grayson Mill rumors that just recently dropped, so we're gonna avoid that because of that. But how you guys are the founders of Welldatabase. Tell everybody kind of just what Welldatabase is real quick. If they're not familiar, I think most people are, because you guys have built such a great product and great following.
And one thing we've been asking people too when they come to our business lately, when they're presenting, is like, what was the problem statement too? What were you trying to solve?
Oh my God. You see, and I've been thinking about this a little bit too, because people start companies for lots of different reasons, and I feel like people skim over that. Like, the reason you start a company really kind of sheds light on your goals and where you're trying to go, and where the customer lies within those goals, and I think that says a lot about it. But Josh and I worked together since we were kids. I don't know how that's happened, but like, we met when we were really young.
Now you're
old. That's right, I am old. Yeah, Josh made the 40 under 40. I aged out, so. But no, we worked at a few different places. We worked together at Schlumberger. We worked at a consulting group, and we were working at New Tech Energy at the time, and we were using one of our competitors today to load data into an ERP system. We had a staff of people loading and cleaning data. We had an expensive contract, and then they bumped us 50% on the contract, which was already high. And I think Josh and I had been tossing around what we want to be doing, because we knew we were game for starting a software company. And so we just got sick of it, and we were like, we don't have API connections. We are trying to jump through hoops. We're paying exorbitant fees for mediocre data. And we're like, screw this. These states are online. We're going to do this ourselves. We're going to provide data with better terms, better prices. We're going to automate this whole thing. And then, that was kind of fateful last words, because it would be years later. Oh, yeah, God. Yeah. Years later, we were finally done. We got the automation system in place, which runs today, which is, people don't realize it, and we go eager with it and on the tech side, because we run, millions of jobs every single day, and people are like, well, what changes for millions? There's 6 million wells in our database. Like, how can you run so many jobs? But we go through and just really eager for looking for updates, changes, anything. And it's all automated, so it doesn't cost us anything to do. Right. So we get really kind of overzealous with spinning off jobs and acquiring that data. So we go out to all the sources, all the state sources, regulatory bodies, and our model that we built is a little bit bigger, and so we can go out to university systems. The frac focus is an easy one. USGS.
University lands, right?
Certain aspects of data out of the EIA, and we pull it all together. We aggregate it all together and give it in one kind of simple interface, so that people can get the data on the public side that they need. And then since it's all automated, we don't have the headcount the other guys have. We don't have the delays the other guys have.
You don't have hordes of
we just
people
pass on the
manually
savings.
Doing data entry?
Yeah,
exactly. We had somebody tell us. We had somebody tell us once, they came into our office, and they said they had been to one of our competitors' office, and they walked through, I guess they were giving them a tour or something, and they said that this dude had a stack of CDs on his desk. And he asked, what is that? And he's like, well, this is the data, is how we load it. We pull the CDs in, and then we copy the data out. And he was blown away by that, and I was too. I don't know what they were talking about. It doesn't make any sense.
Did you ask him if they were CDRs or RWs?
Yeah, well, yeah. No,
that brings up so many like nostalgic memories of me pirating music as a child and just burning DVDs and CDs. You couldn't.
No, yeah, we were having this conversation about this the other day with my son about the PlayStation and the Nintendo 64, and it was all around Final Fantasy moving to the PlayStation, because if you guys played Final Fantasy 7, it's 4 discs, and the cartridges on the N64 were like 400 meg. No, like 40 meg. Yeah, 40 meg. It was going to take 40 of those or something like that. Anyway, so yeah. The CDs, we get talk trash about them now, but man, that was a big jump.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I will never forget wanting a zip drive so bad before CDs really kind of took off, right?
Like, everybody did, right? Yeah.
No, man, those are awesome.
Floppies, and then those were like the next thing that, but they were so much bigger, and then almost.
And then you had the Jazz after, that was even bigger, right?
Yeah, and then the CDs.
The Jazz drive, didn't the Jazz drive do? Yeah, I don't remember what that was. Was that a gigabyte of storage?
It was
storage?
a gigabyte.
I couldn't remember.
A gigabyte of storage, I think.
How expensive was that?
Like
they were so expensive. Like, it's just crazy to look at that. Like, you're in Walgreens now, and you can buy a 256 gig flash drive that fits on your keychain for $20.
Yeah.
Like, well, even I've talked to people who were in like, hardware sales back in even like early 2000s, and it was like, right now we talk about, you mentioned Snowflake. I'm sure we'll get a little bit into that later, but like it's $23 per terabyte compressed, and like they used to sell terabytes for like exorbitant amounts of money, like, and it's just insane.
Yeah, no, we
in the late 90s, I always remember this, that it was $1 per meg for memory, and that was, you wanted a gig of memory, it was $1,000. Now, I just bought 64 gigs for a machine we built here. I think that did cost me $100 for that.
Yeah.
So. Insane.
Oh, man, we're dating ourselves. This is fun.
No, it's good. You got to know where you came from. These kids these days, they don't. I don't
appreciate it.
I don't feel that old.
No, I don't. I'm just like, I genuinely
remember
feel
the
like
transistor radio, John?
I genuinely feel like
my 8-track and my CD. Yeah. Anyway,
our generation, though,
it was a good time. Like,
I feel like got the opportunity to come through at a special time, because I feel like the generation, but like our parents, they're not very good with technology at all. It's all very new to them, but they never got the like opportunity to really try and learn it. And then the next generation, like, everything has gotten a lot better from a graphical interface. Like, all of the stuff on the technology side has gotten better and easier to use. And so, like, like I can't tell you how many computers I broke just messing around with stuff, because that's all there was to do on the computer. Like, you had your games on your floppy disks or whatever, and that was really it. And then file sharing and all of that stuff started, and it's like, man, I really learned a shitload about computers because of that, like, hacking kind of open source mentality from the beginning. And I wonder, like, if that ends up going away because of, things get so much better, or if it just shifts to, a different area. But
I feel like everything also got, like, we got to grow up with it getting progressively more difficult, if that makes sense. Like, everything was super simple in the early 90s, both hardware and software, you know, and you got to toy around. And then as you got older, software got more and more complex and all these things. And now you got these huge areas of software that are totally, branches that didn't exist back then. So we've kind of come along there. And now if you jump in from, like, our kids' age, everything's already way up here. They don't hit that.
Well, that's it. Yeah. That's what I think. They're just starting at a better place. And so, their hacking is a lot more interesting than our hacking was. Our hacking was, can we make this DOS prompt say something back to us? Like, who cares?
My daughter's in there too.
Reading through the giant manuals.
And our kids are now trying to, like, make videos of themselves. And,
my kids don't understand the concept of a mouse. Like, they don't understand why you would use a mouse when they can just touch everything.
Well, my dad just brought this old camcorder he gave me as a gift when I started college. And he brought it over and he's like, I thought you might want this. Like, I will never use that. And my kids are like, ooh, what's that? Like, I mean, like, it just thing's huge. Like, and not nearly as big as the thing that they used to video my second birthday, where my dad, like, rented it and was, like, on his shoulder.
All those family moments on the
No, I have a mini DV cam.
Oh, yeah.
I got a mini DV cam sitting somewhere in a box somewhere. I don't know why I still have it. It's complete garbage. But
Anyway,
No, I was going to say though, I remember my dad bringing home his first computer. It was in the '80s, late '80s, and he was showing me how you can save a Word document on a disk. They didn't have enough memory really to
Right.
store or storage to store anything locally. And I was like, this is the biggest waste of time. I think I said that to him. I was like, Dad, this is dumb. This is a waste of time. Who cares about computers?
we'll never use this, Dad.
Yeah.
It's like what was the
Yeah.
Today Show, like Katie Couric, and then we're laughing at email, like who's ever going to use this? You know, they thought it was so fun. And,
Digital messaging.
Yeah.
Well, cool. Like,
Internet's
so let's jump
bad.
into databases. I guess, I mean, again, maybe the tech story, because I mean, I'm really interested because I know I've talked to you over the last few years, and I feel like even some things have changed maybe philosophically, potentially, or maybe they didn't. I just made some assumptions. But let's talk about like how, you know, maybe where the tech stack started, where you're at now, and like, you know, why there were certain evolutions, you know, whether it was hardware and or software decisions. And
Yeah, even like a step before that too, which is, you know, what were the real hard pain points you were trying to solve with the product? Because, you know, in my opinion, you guys, you know, you've got Combo Curve, you've got a bunch of these companies that have spun up. The root of what they're trying to do isn't different than what exists on the market, but how they're doing it is basically if you blew up the existing company and started from scratch
How'd
at
you do
that
it today,
point
or-
in time, right? And so there's a lot different ways and techniques that you guys use versus your competitors, or even just regardless legacy software products that I'm very curious to kind of hear how y'all strategize that, architected out, all that stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And from the
Josh,
very
you
beginning,
know,
number one, everything had to be automated. Like we're a small team, you know, so that was like a foundational thing that has run all the way till today. You know, now we're starting to, lean on even AI and all that to automate document processing and that kind of stuff. But even back then, everything always had to be automated, and that drove a lot of our choices. And then cost.
You know what
also
drove
being
more of our
bootstrapped.
choices? Yeah, being bootstrapped. We didn't
Yeah,
have any
bootstrap.
money.
I was gonna say besides
and-
that, yeah.
And the fact is that the numbers, most of the companies you're talking about there, and most companies today, they don't have any money. You hop on the cloud and you start some incremental expenses on, you know, because if you just are doing a web app on the cloud with some minimal user storage or whatever it may be, it's cost is fine. It's not a big deal. You can squeak by for a couple $100 a month and be just fine. Our product, day one, had to have the data, and this data is not. So, you know, we joke about this. It's not big data, but it's not small data. It's
Right.
big-ish data. And so, like, we couldn't the sheer okay. You also rewind this back to when we started back in, you know, very first in 2008, but really more in earnest in 10 or so. The storage it was going to cost us for just the storage and the database access that we needed to function was going to be in the range of $10,000 per month. And so that automatically made that just a no-go for us. We were bootstrapped, and Josh and I aren't wealthy people. We didn't come from money or anything like that. So this is a real bootstrap, like work on it at nights and until it can make some money, and then keep working on it at nights. But anyway, so, you know, our goal was to piecemeal what we could get together, what we could pay for out of pocket, and you just kind of, you know, beg, steal, and borrow what we can to get off the ground. And so we've always hosted our own infrastructure because of that.
I was gonna say, even when we started there, 2010, you didn't really have Azure Cloud you were
Right,
spinning up.
right.
You know,
Yeah.
it was starting to become a thing.
Yeah,
But
the
when we
cloud was
started, it
still
wasn't.
very
When
new.
we started, yeah. And so cost was extremely high. And then so when we started, you know, we knew we were a Microsoft shop where we worked, and so we kind of knew that. And at the time, Microsoft launched their BizSpark program, which lets you get in some licensing and all that. So that helped us offset or get our database stuff, and, you know, kind of drove choices along the way as well.
Yeah, there's a couple of things there. One, I had this conversation earlier this week with somebody as far as like, well, we need this function to happen, and we need, you know, should we write a script or should we find, you know, a different way to do it? And I was like, well, let's use, and it's funny because it's like a few years ago, you can ask Bobby, I would have never said this out loud, but I was like, well, let's just use like a Zapier or Make or something like that to start it and get it in place, because we need the speed of this feature, and then we will turn it to the developers and get it on their backlog, and then they will get to it when we have the time in our backlog to get to it. But you know, there's that, like, I think bootstrap companies are so interesting because the mentality is just so much different, right? It's like survive is literally the mentality.
Yeah.
And so like you learn these things of like, oh, well, I can use a low code tool in the short term to get this moving and keep things rolling and put this in the backlog in the long term so that I can, get to it when I need to get to it, not have to drop everything today or hire another developer. Like there's so many, especially now, like I know back then it probably wasn't nearly as fruitful as it is now with all the different integration tools and RPA and no code stuff. But I think that's a big thing that a lot of people just don't think about it, right? Or like in principle, they're against it. Like I hated Zapier for the longest time because it's like, I'm just paying you for these stupid API calls that I know I could write, but I don't have the time to write and maintain 100 of them, right? And so it's like, okay, now I understand the value of what you do.
Yeah. No, we've definitely seen some of that. It's hard. Josh and I are both technical, obviously. We're both programmers, and so we definitely run more into, you run into a problem and let's just write the code to solve it and do it once and do it right. And which just sounds nice, except for the tasks add up much faster and you can complete them. Yeah. And I mean, it's a trade-off. I mean, one's a technical debt that you're taking on. Like if you do that script or no code or whatever it is, it's a piece of debt. And, 1, 2, as things go on, these technical debt things start to stack up, and, you have to manage that debt and your time and, walk that fine balance.
Yeah, no, it's actually a habit I've got into as a piece of advice I'll throw out there. But if you do use these no-code tools or whatever with your applications or software or whatever they may be, when you set them up, go and throw that function into your backlog as tech debt. I have a tech debt tag that I put in there now because, well, putting it in the backlog and not categorizing it in that way just means it's another backlog item and there's no like priority put on it or anything like that. But putting it as tech debt, like just that word debt feels bad to humans, right? Like we don't like that. And so it's like, hey, these are the
so
things
bad
that are
you just
important.
flush it out one day.
Right. And so like at some point we're going to need to fix this shit. And so it's not going to just go get lost in the backlog somewhere. But
right.
No, I think another thing you mentioned was like the startup initiatives and programs that a lot of these guys have. Like I knew that they were there. I didn't realize how easy they were to like get and apply for. And, a lot of them out of the box are like $5,000-$10,000 worth of credits most of the time now, up to,
six figures. And the credit side. And this BizSpark one, again, being a Microsoft, Josh and I being Microsoft kind of in our past corporate lives, Microsoft at the time, and I don't know, it gets bad raps here and there, but honestly, it's
what most of the industry uses.
Yeah,
exactly.
I mean, this was the start of new Microsoft for what it's worth. So, it was the
right.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm assuming.
And so, being.
Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I interrupted you.
Well, no, it's just it's funny because even today you see the breakdown of developers on Stack Overflow surveys and stuff like that. These Python developers are ruling the world, and then you got all the other kind of weird offshoots and back end code. Anyway, .NET gets this like weird corporate rap that people don't want to jump into, but if you play with .NET Core, I mean, you can you can script as easily as you can in Python using Core and spin it up in the same ways. And so anyway, I don't, it's funny. I still think it gets a bad rap unnecessarily.
Yeah. I mean, Microsoft in general, I mean, even like it was like, oh, they're so anti open source. And then they bought GitHub, but when they bought GitHub, they were the largest contributor to open source. It's like, and which again, they've always had that whole embrace, extend, extinguish thing, in their history. So you kind of wonder sometimes about their intentions, but again, they're going to be here for the long haul, and I think you can build off of them. And it's not just a flavor of the month. It's going to be supported, and there's going to be stuff behind you.
I think a lot of that just stems from like how we grew up thinking of Microsoft and Apple, like our generation's perspective of those softwares, right? And like that 90s, early 2000s version of Microsoft is very different, in my opinion, than what they are now. But it took a long time for people to like trust that they weren't going to go back to that. That it wasn't that like, we're just going to buy them to kill off the competitor and not do anything with it kind of scenario.
Yeah, even .NET, they have an image problem because a lot of their image, even though it's an open source, framework and everything, it's still tied to the older frameworks. A lot of people don't realize that it is open source, runs on Linux, runs anywhere you need it to, and like it's just a whole different ballgame.
So, but let's talk about that because I mean, I think .NET Core has been a big deal. Like, has it always been that way, or was that? I feel like .NET Core was a more in the last 5-10 years, or has it always been? Yeah.
Last 5 years. That sounds about right. They started with .NET Standard. They had a whole weird naming thing that's been confusing, and now it's standardized back to .NET 8.
Okay.
Standard, then
so did Core
Standard, then Core, then now it's mainline.
Right. Yep.
So how did that change? So when you started, was it kind of more of a monolithic architecture, or I guess because again, I guess there's two sides of this too. There's the whole running all your jobs to aggregate the data, right? And that's kind of a somewhat separate service in a way. And then you've got to host your web app, right? I mean, can you talk about maybe the way that was architected, and then I guess did like say the advent of containers and .NET Core and some of that, did that change? How did you make some efforts to break that out? Just kind of curious on that.
Yeah, I think starting kind of like high level architecture where y'all started, and then going through the evolution and things you had to change, and both pros and cons of all those fun things.
Yeah, so the original automation system was written in .NET Framework. I think it even started on like 3.5 or something like that, which is right when Link was brought around, which is kind of a big thing for .NET. But so it was written in .NET Framework and it used app domains. So it would dynamically load sub-assemblies and basically run these. Like John mentioned earlier, each of our sources, as we call them, gets their own code base, and they can be run independently. And so we just basically had this thing that we call the zombie that goes out and gets these things, runs these jobs, and then delivers the results back, and then processes them. So it's kind of like you could spin up multiple instances of it, but it did all run. It was kind of a mess. And so now that whole system has moved to Core, and we're even still making changes on it now. It's definitely more it's more broken out. And each source we're moving it to its own microservice so that they can just process the jobs as they go. They don't have to dynamically load these assemblies and all that kind of thing, which is somewhat wasteful, and we can horizontally scale. Like say Texas, when we get their production, we need to run just a ton of jobs. And today it's kind of, we can scale the zombies all horizontally together, but we can't scale Texas individually, for example. And where we're heading, we'll make it so that we can scale Texas's resources independently from, say, like Montana that hasn't updated.
But it's crazy though, because the first iteration of our zombie was a WinForms, and you would hop on the machine and you would spawn up 15 instances of it, and you could direct it to pull jobs from one source or another, but still you would open up the remote into one of our just workstations that we had, and there would just be like this cascade of windows there running all the jobs. And when you think about that, like how that used to look, and then now they're just containers in Kubernetes, and we just go change it to say we want 50 instances of it, and then they all just spin up in Kubernetes, and we have them all run in our cluster. And it's a pretty massive difference when you think about that. Code wise, it's not. I mean, there was a lot that went into it, but it wasn't that bad. Changing app domain stuff around to get it into, and just kind of losing the libraries that weren't core compatible. And then once you do that, you're good to go in Ubuntu. And then once you're in Ubuntu, you can spin up containers in Kubernetes, no problem.
So were y'all
running... today it works largely the same. It's communicating, instead of loading assemblies over app domains, it just downloads the package and creates a gRPC communication channel between the zombie and whatnot, runs its work, and then delivers the work back, the result back. So it's similar but different.
So
there's one other side of this I want to touch on, though, is that the database side is interesting. Because,
I want to get on that.
The way we do this. Just a high level, the database, every state or every source gets their own database, but then the kind of collapsing into the instance that runs the site used to be kind of batch job situation, where we would kind of every night we would try to pull these things together and then push them over, run all of our rules and normalization, aliasing, and all that stuff on like a batch job. Now everything's using messaging and pushing, and so like today, if you go to like North Dakota, where the NDIC publishes out their permit file at like 5 o'clock every night or something like that, our jobs are automated and scheduled to go look for that job and look for that file. Once it finds the file, it processes, pushes the messages to the front. Those go directly to our site. They're live on our site literally 2 to 3 minutes after they're made available from the NDIC.
That's wild.
And that's running through all of our rules and everything, so.
Right.
And it reduced locking and everything going that way. It helped us make it a lot more scalable.
Sweet. Yeah, I was going to ask kind of just quickly about your journey and or experience to containers and then Kubernetes, and then definitely also want to talk about the database side as well, because I think that's another one. And then at some point we're also going to talk about self-hosting your hardware, because that's yet another
Well,
one.
I mean, I think that may play into the whole Kubernetes thing too, because I think most people think of Kubernetes being on the cloud, but
right,
I mean, like,
cloud only.
The implications of that, running on-prem and everything. But yeah, let's focus there.
Pretty funny, right? Because they call it cloud. What do you call it? Cloud compatible, cloud ready, cloud whatever. All it means is it could be cloud native, orchestrated, and independently run like a microservice in Docker, and so anyway, yeah, it's funny because people do think Kubernetes. They just think that that's a Google thing or an AWS. You just spin up a Kubernetes, but like it's really just Docker orchestration and setting it up yourself. Don't get me wrong. I'm not recommending it for the faint of heart. There's a lot that goes into that, and it doesn't stop once you get your cluster spun up. But it's all very doable.
Yeah, there are a lot of knobs to tweak in Kubernetes, and I don't think people really realize that. And like even me as a non-developer, I know nothing about architecture. Like when I was at HiveCell, our push button deployment of it was great to deploy it, but you could still go into, I don't even remember the name of the management tool we were using. You could go in the back end.
Weren't you guys using Rancher?
It wasn't, not for the Kubernetes
for
monitoring. It was something else, but you go into it and you could see your instance, you could see the 3 clusters, and but there is just like an infinite number of settings in this GUI, and I'm like, I can only imagine what's underneath this with like the YAML and all the other config things that you can do. But it's it's for those people who are unfamiliar or whatever. Like I think a lot of people have either recently migrated to containers or finally containerized, whatever, but then there's this like weird, Kubernetes is just like the orchestration of containers. It shouldn't be that big of a jump, but it's not easy. And there's not a ton of people that are experts in Kubernetes across the world, even, as I found out when I was at HiveCell when we were trying to hire people. And so like that's a big kind of, it's not a risk, but it's a decision a lot of companies are looking at or have to make and stuff. And so I'm very curious on y'all's end, because it's one of those things that it's definitely not necessary for every application, right? Like Bobby and I are in the same camp that I don't know that Kubernetes is the best option for Edge as it is today, and things like that, right? But like, just give people your kind of experience, thoughts, feedback on that, considerations to think about.
Yeah. Well, like John said, it's not for the faint of heart, and we made the jump all at once, right? So we went from basically that WinForms application or a slight version of it into containers and running everything in Kubernetes. So it's kind of like, let's just go all in.
You didn't toe dip. It wasn't like, we're going to try some containers. It was like, no, we're going to do containers with Kubernetes and just do it.
Yeah, I think that's basically the move. And so it was painful at first, I'm not going to lie. And we didn't really know what we didn't know. It was one of those things that we got in. And we used Rancher to get started. That made it easier, because it kind of, I don't know if you've ever seen that. There's Kubernetes, Kubernetes the hard way, and you go read through that about setting it all up manually, and you're like, wow.
Yeah, no thanks.
Not
for two bootstrap people.
It's absurd.
Yeah. And so, we went into it with Rancher. It made it easing into that part easier. And, we just kind of started using pieces here for like the back-end systems, deploying the zombies there and letting it orchestrate as we added nodes in. Same thing with the site. The site is mostly like the main portal is basically a monolith, but we kind of branch out to services as needed. Like we have an export system there. We have like a print system. Basically anything that would slow down the main site, like a hot path, we'll put it over there so that we can get higher throughput. So all of those went into the cluster.
And I do think we've done a good job of being open-minded, trying to always use the best tool for the job. And so what you said is a good point. There are things that work well in Kubernetes and things that don't. And we've tested a lot of things, and we've actually come to the conclusion that by and large, stateful sets don't really do. It's obvious that the K8s, or anyway, it was tacked on later. It's not well thought out. It works when it works, and then it doesn't. And between the networking stuff that we had to learn that goes on inside of Kubernetes, and then And then the kind of run-ins with stateful sets. We've definitely come to conclude that there's aspects of it. I mean, the thing was built to run in memory. That's what you have to keep in mind. If your stuff can run in memory, then it probably goes well there. If you need to write to disk, then it's something to consider. Small disks probably work fine. Large disks are a bit of a nightmare. And so at this point in time, we actually do run all of our databases outside of the cluster.
Yeah.
And then there's a few stateful things inside the cluster, but they are ones that are only stateful for the to hold on reboot, like Redis stuff that we can reload and things, but they live in
then
memory.
it just uses a pure cache in that case. And then even like our printing system, like the job gets lost, I don't care. It has an empty disk, it gets mounted with 100 gigs of space, and it gets wiped on reboot. I don't really care about that.
Damn.
Yeah, but I would say that anyone who's diving into it, there is a right tool for the job, and you don't just blanket lay a blanket statement across any of these. You really have to kind of look and see what the tools were meant to do, and if you're doing something it wasn't meant to do, maybe you should look around and see if there's another tool that is indeed meant to do what you're looking for.
Yeah, no, that was the interesting thing conceptually about Kubernetes at the edge, right? Is it's like, robust resiliency, like failover makes a lot of sense if you're trying to automate like an expensive or risky, dangerous application, right? Like you're not going to be able to do that unless all the code is at the source without having to connect to the internet. Mm-hmm. The flip side of that is Kubernetes was designed for cloud or architecture, or just mainframes and just a steady single location, single network computer setup. And guess what? When you are on the edge, especially in the oil field, and you're moving networks every 2 to 3 weeks, it's not very good. Kubernetes is not like being set up on one network and then being moved to another. It's
no. The cluster itself can jump between networks, but don't move the nodes of the cluster. But it's
fun stuff.
No, there is though. I mean, again, I saw something on the LinkedIn, which I question its values. Everyone knows, but people talking about, not needing to, make some big solution. I get what they were getting at. I forget who it was, and Josh, you might remember more, but it's just like people talking about use Excel if it gets the job done. And like, okay, there's a tool for the job. The same thing I've been saying. Like if you want to use Excel to get a proof of concept up, cool, do it. But like we talked about earlier, each of those steps is a debt that you're going to have to deal with on the technical side. So, just keep track of them. And if you just keep working in Excel and keep racking up that debt, then you are either building a house of cards or, you're going to hope to sell before it crashes on you. That's all I can
waste a lot of time.
I mean, same with Spotfire. Again, it's a great way to get started, go fast. But I mean, like at some point you run into limitations or, just, again, you let enough citizen developers develop in it and it's way too slow, or it's taking a lot longer than it took when they had less data 2 years ago, and is what it is. But
It's definitely a different. Like, I mean, there's so many things: Grafana, Spotfire, Power BI. Like, there's all those things that are just like great tools to help Zapier. Like all those little things that can really speed up. Just like, okay, instead of spending a day coding this, and then maybe 6 months in the future, I've got to spend another day recoding it because they changed their auth version or whatever. Like, hey, it literally takes you 10 minutes to set it up, and then as long as you document it, like you survive to see another day and work on the more important stuff, and hopefully you have enough money at some point, whether it's through funding or revenue, that hey, we can now hire a bunch of people to start taking care of this stuff. But it's a very happy medium, very fine line.
Because again, like, and I guess it's tough. Same with Excel or Spotfire. Some of these, like, but they end up in production. Right. They're being used to make decisions and so on. Yeah. But I mean, personally, from my lens now, more as like a data architect, data engineer, look at it more of like, these are great prototyping tools. Yeah. Like, I mean, like if I can give someone a live wireframe, like this is what I want it to do, but I need it, to be done in a web app or something, more robust, then.
That's, I tell everybody that I talk to that is like working on an app idea or in the middle of development or in product, like if you're talking to developers and they don't have like a deep understanding of exactly what you're doing or trying to solve, build some kind of mock-up demo. I used it's called TL Draw, so it's like TLDR, but TL Draw. It's a new AI thing the other day to try and show our developers what I wanted our menus to look like on this next iteration of Collide. And it took maybe 10 minutes and a few iterations of me just drawing on this thing and adding text to it. And I had a live demoable thing of exactly how I wanted our text fields to work that I could. It was a live website. I shared it with them via a link. Like it was, that is awesome. Like it saves so much time.
So let's chat about the database.
No, I agree. You see,
No, I'm sorry. Sorry, I know this
you
remote
started
thing.
with developers, and it makes it harder. I know. So many of these people that don't even start with the developer side, they build out these things and then like they get to developers later. And once they do, they never had it documented properly. And now all of a sudden they're trying to, and if you guys talk to developers, like Josh and I are developers, so we can say what we want about them. Like developers are challenging to get your point across too, because like they are just problem solvers. They're, everything's a nail kind of situation. They're hammers.
Oh yeah.
So like you can't just throw things at them. You have to line them out really nicely. And if you didn't document along the way, then having developers, John, what you said about, doing it to send to developers, that's perfect. But if you don't have developers, then that's where you get in that black hole and you'll get developers one day. But yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's, it's, if you've ever given a developer a backlog of a checklist, like that's how I think about it. Anytime I build a backlog or features or anything like that, it's like they're thinking of this as a checklist of shit that they need to do, and as long as it meets the requirement that you put here, that is checked off the box. So you need to make sure you are incredibly accurate and detailed with that requirement. And another way to do that is just to use a mock-up. So much easier to use a mock-up or a template or something. PowerPoint.
Picture's worth 1,000 words, right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
But even like that reminds me.
Detailed spec.
Like John and I were working on the web app for RDS, and we had a developer, and again we were capturing time series data, like time stamped from the sensor, but the developer used the inserted timestamp from the database, so like everything was stacked on the same timestamps whenever it was actually like, and we're like, no, we need the one from the sensor, but like again, things you just assume that they knew, but you don't realize how explicit you have to be sometimes.
That's true.
The phrase "assumptions are deadly" is never truer than in software development. Never assume.
And then that anything. Was however much money in developer time that you paid for, that then had to be,
now you're
doubling
again
up on
to rework it in the future.
So let's jump in on the database side, because I think we're getting downstream. You got these jobs, whatever, but you're dealing with plenty of rectangular data, but you're also dealing with a lot of like unstructured data too. So curious how you maybe stage that. Are those in different types of databases or layers? And then does it all end up, you said Microsoft Shop, so I'm assuming probably SQL Server, but just kind of curious about that side of the stack.
Yeah. So
Josh.
Sure. Yeah. So we started obviously with SQL Server. We're currently migrating to Postgres. It's kind of a long thing. Obviously, we have stuff in Snowflake as well, but again, with long-standing costs, we haven't wanted to go all in on Postgres. But our unstructured stuff ends up in Postgres today, and it ends up. So basically we get files in, and they'll go into a queue to get processed through a variety of different ways to pull out all that data, and then we have the jobs go in and try and catalog the data that was in the files, right?
Is that like dropping into like a JSON blob kind of thing, and then
right? Yeah, exactly. So we go JSON blob, and we'll go through, and we'll have jobs that know how to kind of look for the data and the different file types and that kind of thing. We have a lot of these files that we get from the state. Like, was it the Texas file, for example? It's like 200 pages with no bookmarks and that kind of stuff. So we have to start way out of classifying these documents as we break them apart. So we have to start at real high level and then get really specific as we can.
Yeah, I was going to ask,
right, and that's the thing about
No, go ahead. Sorry.
The the unstructured data is an interesting one though, because because there are standardized forms, and standardized forms are nice. And there's a lot of things as time has moved on for dynamically recognizing key value pairs out of structured forms, for breaking out tables. But even those, we then have to kind of cross-reference against our data model to try to understand what this data is. Of course, there's always the revision numbers and document numbers in the corners of these things, but at the end of the day, I think we had an idea once that we could potentially make some generic readers that could handle, once we classified the types of documents to what they were, that we would use generic readers to extract the data, and then actually kind of, even in the classification, understand what the document is by cross-referencing our data model to understand which properties are being addressed in that document, then dynamically pulling out the key value pairs and then writing them automated into each of the data pieces. Which is not, it has worked somewhat. Like North Dakota, because is the opposite of what Josh said, has a massive PDF, but has lots of bookmarks in it. And pulling out a Form 6 out of the NDIC file is not hard. And in that file, there's a handful of things that are really helpful. Things like frac stages and pressures and things like that. But yeah, structurally wise, it is still challenging, because no matter what we talk about storage, what do we have, Josh? 60, 80 million documents in our system, each of which could be 10, 20,000 pages. It's all over the place.
Then you've got to convert those to images.
The cost and processing power. Yeah, they're insane. If you want to use an AWS text extract, and you want to do the key value pair and table extractions, you're talking about 6 cents a page. Until you hit scale, and even at that, and that scale means like you're spending $1 million a year on that. And again, it's just a crazy thing.
Ghost Script and some of these other Python libraries. I was actually looking at that earlier this week.
Yeah. Well, and then so many of these things, we do have individual parsers that address specific types of documents, just because they are, even that NDIC permit file I talked about earlier, it has this like crazy variable number of comma delimited fields, and you have to basically inspect each one of them and try to determine which one it is. And they'll just change it on you for fun. They'll add in bottom hole, section, township, range in the 8th space for no good reason, and not even really tell you what it is. And so you just have to write. I think there's got to be 100 different test cases for that file type in our system.
Was that the one the one with the activity? Or there was I was trying to parse some.
Yeah, it's the activity.
I felt your pain on that.
It's a daily activity one that has the permit part at the top is cool. But then it goes through all these other different activity types, and but the permit part at the top was the one I was talking about. We have 100 cases for all the other types. A lot of them we do catalog what the movement was, and then go back to the state page for that well and get the details from that. But sorry, we got off on a tangent there, because the data files, though, that goes to Postgres. And I think it is important that we talk about we've always used ORMs in our code, I think, because we always had the idea that we need to be flexible. SQL Server was a great way to get started. But for horizontal scaling and cost, we're going to be moving to Postgres. And so the fact that we're on, EF Core means that we can make that change without an extreme amount of work. And so I think that's important for flexibility. Databases, especially the relational database side, they're not all apples, I should say, but they're more like apples and pears. They're similar enough that you should, when you architect your systems, being able to be flexible on that back-end database, I think, is an important thing.
Part of the migration strategies with those messages now, before we were reliant on replication directly in SQL to get this stuff done as part of batch jobs. Now these messages can write to both, and so we can have this happening, migration seamless to the customers, right? And then we just go all in on Postgres once we ensure that we have the performance and everything that we need to run the site.
Can you step back real quick and explain to people, because I don't think we've talked about ORMs yet on the podcast. For the people who may not understand, can you just give a real high level, what is an ORM, and why is it useful?
You going, John, or me?
Josh, it's you. No, you.
Nice. Yeah, so obviously you have to store data in databases, and so they have their specific data types that are in there. And then when you get into languages, you have different data types in the language, and you have this mismatch between them. and you can create an ORM lets you create a mapping basically from the database into your language of choice, and it makes it seamless. And most of them have built-in providers for different languages or for different database servers, right? So you can you don't actually write your SQL by hand. You would write, say, I want this, and it would go ahead and translate it. And you're sending it to SQL Server, you're sending it to Postgres. It'll translate that query to your target database, and you just get your data back, and it doesn't really matter.
Doesn't care. Yeah.
Doesn't care. That's the ideal world. You obviously have these providers for the different databases, and inevitably have differences in how they generate the queries. Oh, yeah. So you have a little bit of a leaky abstraction there, but the idea is that it should be that easy.
Yeah. No, I've got two other questions. One, we haven't talked a lot about OCR with anybody yet, so I want to kind of just get some info from y'all there. And then two, I want to kind of roll that into probably our last kind of topic before we do our speed round. But like, how kind of, once you answer that, how has kind of some of the new AI computer vision stuff, have y'all looked at any of that at all? Or like, do you see that as kind of the next iteration of the OCR RPA types? So I say OCR, I really am talking about RPA in the grand scheme of things, but that's obviously a big, buzzword, consultancy term that's been floating around these past few years. And I do think that, like a lot of what y'all are doing, a lot of accounting departments, like there's so much opportunity for RPA where it's literally just removing human data entry from, reading a form to putting it in another form. There's so much room for improvement in the energy space for that. So I'm curious kind of what your experience and stuff has been like with OCR, and then kind of what do you see in the future of that space as well?
Yeah, I think we can both chime in on some of this. My frustration with some of this is so like even Amazon Textract has had its machine learning capabilities built in, and they work at scale, and so building that model works. It's good to do. The open source tools that we've played around with on OCR stuff, they have capabilities to be trained, but the scale in which you have to work on to train those models is sometimes challenging to deal with, especially when you've got like data set like ours, where we've got, whatever it is, 26, 30 different sources of documents, and none of them have more than, Texas would have, at least, millions of the documents, but then these other states like North Dakota, 30,000. I mean, you basically barely have enough to train a full model, right, to do this part for you. I mean, the size of the data is challenging, but if you use like an AWS to do it, they've got a lot of scale to work with, but they'll charge you for it. Yeah. And so like, it's a little bit of a chicken and egg thing, right, as far as there's great tools out there, and honestly, they're getting better and better. And even OpenAI, Josh can talk to a little bit more on what we've done on the vision side there. But these big scale, these big companies that have the scale have a lot of opportunity there, but they also have a lot of expense there that it costs for people like us to work through. So there's a number of tools, but and that's the other thing. Josh has worked on some of the document identification stuff, and some of these, especially old documents, right, they just require so much massaging before you can actually run them through anything.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's got to be one of the biggest. Like, my first roommate when I moved to Houston, he had just graduated. He was studying for the bar, but he was working as a landman. And I remember the first day he came back, he was like, "Yeah, we were talking." And I was like, "How'd it go?" He's like, "Yeah, well, I went from 18 whatever or 19 whatever to present." I was like, "That's a really random number." It was like 1890 something, whatever. It's like, why that? He's like, "Oh, well, that's when they started using the typewriter." And I was like, "Oh." I was like, "So you've got like 200 years of title documents that are like script, literally." And I'm like, so land is just so screwed as far as like the digitizing part.
I've got a guest that we need to bring on. I just saw a platform last week. It was pretty sweet.
Yeah. But yeah, I think that's just the big thing that, the average person that, might be listening or whatever that isn't involved in kind of the regulatory space or the data space doesn't realize that literally every single state has their own data sets, their own data types, their own data formats, their own structures, whether they have structured forms or unstructured forms, whether they consistently put the data in the same spot on that form or not. Like,
multiple revisions of that same form over the years.
Is it in cursive?
Forms changed slightly.
Yeah. And none of it was ever architected to be, ingested by computers, essentially. On
Right.
the back end.
Not like they all have nice little black boxes around them. You're like, just give me this region of it, and it's like, no, it's usually skewed real bad. And so when we started with Tesseract, I think, way back, and we thought we would just do the basics, grab a file, throw it in there, and give us all this information back. And it turns out that's not at all the case. Like, you give it a whole document. Though. If you give it a whole document, it's going to give you scrambled gibberish paragraphs, and it does give you text back, but you have like no real recognition of what's going on, how it lines up with the document without actually looking at it.
Yeah. I mean, we did some stuff with that, but it basically just took the dump of the Tesseract and put it into like Elasticsearch, and at least made it searchable. But like when you guys are trying to take specific pieces and put them into like a structured data set that people can use, like it's a way different story.
Yeah.
Well, and then
that's it, and that's exactly what you see it working well for, like Solar and Elasticsearch ingestion. That's like what it does, and so you can find the documents in that case. But when we need like what was the depth or who's the operator on this filing or whatever, it's like, and that's where John was talking about. We actually started playing with the newer ChatGPT vision stuff, where we obviously had to build these kind of model and classification so we can identify the document and then go pull these areas out using Tesseract, right? But like ChatGPT's new vision stuff, you can like give it a document and say, who's the operator on this thing? And it gives you the answer back. And you're like, this is impressive. And you'd be like, what's the official name of this company? And it gives you even extra information as long as, it's an older company, but it's super impressive. So it's stuff we started, at least, I wouldn't say we could trust it 100% yet, because it does still have it'll grab random stuff. But, if we have these multiple data points, we can kind of get an idea of, that's right. That looks.
Will like the ChatGPT vision stuff, will that give you like a confidence rating? Because say with Tesseract, I mess with it, like it'll give you a confidence rating of a certain piece of information.
Right. Yeah, you can have it do that.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I think that's the
thing.
And
that's the beauty about our systems. And we combat some of that too, because we have a database of all the operators. We have a database of all the fields, all of the leases. I mean, we have all this information for this existing data set. And so it helps us to cross-reference our existing data set to help ensure that the data pieces line up nicely as expected. And then we have written, and it's unfortunate, but we did write a kind of a key value parser out for standardized forms. And it really is funny to do, because you're like, I'm looking for this keyword, and then I'm looking, left, up, beneath, what's my next keyword? What's my spacing to look for? Okay, now I've got my box.
Like a moving window.
Now give me the text out of that box. Now cross-reference that box to my other data to make sure this looks correct. And anyway, it's so there's cool things. And I mean, we wrote that part, but it's the kind of thing that you'll get out of a Tesseract, if you want to pay for it. So that's always, money comes into play in all of this.
Of course.
For sure.
Yeah, all problems are solvable, right? If you've got a big enough budget. I think that's
true.
That's really the big thing that I've, even just in starting to mess around with some of that stuff earlier this week, I've taken away, is that like with RPA and OCR, if you've got an invoice and it's from the same company and it's the same structure and format and everything is always in the same places or in the same general areas, much easier to do than you've got 100 different data sources and none of them are the same, and some of them conform and will always be in the same way and others won't. Like, it's a very different story. And of course it all boils back to the data, which is
and you go look at the existing solutions out there. Like, you have Butler and a whole bunch of companies that are making these real nice OCR systems, but they're more targeted at stuff like that, like scanning in receipts and
invoices,
things, and not these big invoices and that kind of stuff. And they even have templates, driver's license, all that kind of stuff. And it's like, okay, well, can we use this?
Solved problems.
It's not going to work.
It's goofy. Yeah, check is easy to read. Receipt's easy to read. Even an invoice is almost, again, line items, totals, sums. There's a few keywords. But when you are given, like we talked about, each state might have 15 different forms and 15 different revisions of those 15 forms, and that's times 30 different. It's a whole different.
And then you get into like you're talking about title opinion. We were talking about it with that company the other day, and like we have some that are 500 to 1,000 pages long. And you talk about money, like you have to spend enough money with OpenAI, even for them to unlock that many pages. But I mean, it's not trivial. And then, I mean, I mentioned Textract, and like even AWS has part of the service where you can say, if it's below this confidence interval, we'll send it to some people in India and they'll look at it and, do that last, mile for you.
Yeah.
Yep.
No, that's
well, and I'll say a funny story about OpenAI. We fed some data into it, back in December, and I found it pretty comical. We were just testing out some things and started asking it questions about some data and some permitting documents that we sent, and it started returning back fields from one of our competitors, and it said their name _ lease or something like that, and I'm like, where did you get this? And it's like, oh, sorry, we just pulled this. And like, what do you mean, oh, sorry?
Yeah,
like,
that's true.
Where did this come from?
we pulled it from their
And
Azure
it's just like
instance,
we just mixed up some data.
Yeah.
Ignore this. And you're like, I can't just anyway. Sorry.
Yeah.
It was pretty weird.
That's wild.
Like, it blew my mind.
That's that's an interesting conversation, and my personal and our thoughts as a company on what that structure looks like in the future, as far as like corporates, and like how do you provide people with general information from a GPT model, but also allow them access to their private information within their own models at the same time, so that the contextualized model can give you the detail and the high level general model can give you kind of the general stuff around it.
Well, but think about these, like Saudi or some of these countries where they have the federated, like where you have to keep things within their bounds, but maybe they want to utilize that, but you have to run everything within. No data can leave,
the country.
The country.
Yeah.
No, it's gonna be interesting to see the path forward. I mean, I know we've said multiple times we need to pull together like a little panel discussion on like AI, like just implications and all that. I mean,
I read a paper 2 or 3 days ago, and it was there's a couple new methodologies where they're merging AI models. They're merging the answers of the AI models in this new way where it provides much more context, but also, interestingly enough, allows the models to essentially one of them to train the other one as far as it based off the responses. So if its response is better than your model's response, it'll learn that and continuously improve. And so it's like, golly, this
sounds like Skynet.
Yeah. This is going to get crazy really fast. And then I saw the video yesterday on Reels of I don't even remember the name of it. I'll put it in the show notes or something, but this new robot that they came out with, and it's just like mechanical arms on a dolly, and you train it physically how to do it. But it was unbelievable. Like it was making coffee with, the Keurig pods. It was washing dishes. It was opening doors. It was doing all this stuff. And it's just like these arms that you put on, you do it yourself, and then it learns it. And then that's it.
Wow.
And I'm like,
that makes sense to me.
Future
That's
is crazy.
Well, it'll definitely fold closer than me, and my wife will be happy about it.
Oh, God. Or just put them
I
in
like
the
stuff like
drawers.
that better than this. We've got this hyper focus on these language models, and they're neat. Don't get me wrong, but like they're very just like they're kind of to
Toys.
me, they're being used for more than they're intended for, and so it ends up in some weird state. So the idea of learning that kind of activity is actually way more interesting to me than another large language model chatbot goofiness.
Well, I've always thought that was fascinating, right? Like all of us grew up believing that robots would be butlers and like driving us places and doing all of these low level jobs. And in
Rosie
reality,
from the Jetsons.
Right. And in reality, it's now replacing, creative jobs or like what, it's this weird dichotomy of like, where are the robot janitors? Those don't exist. But now we have robot artists and, musicians and all this crazy stuff.
It's odd, but I mean, it's true. It's easier to learn.
Yeah. We're out of time, so we got to jump into the speed round because we got another one coming up.
Yeah.
But I'm gonna ask you guys a gaming question, and I'll try and keep it in a general time frame. Sonic, NBA Jam, GoldenEye, or Zelda?
Which one?
Pick
First?
Pick one.
GoldenEye.
See, because I love Tears of the Kingdom and Breath of the Wild, but
I almost said Kingdom Hearts.
I'm going to go with GoldenEye too. That first person,
that was
like because I played Doom and that,
Doom was
but like GoldenEye was awesome. So GoldenEye wins.
It's the only game I've ever been in a competition with.
I love GoldenEye so much fun. It's so hard to play now.
A mall gaming competition. I won Myst.
That's awesome.
Another game.
Yeah, I remember Myst.
Who's your favorite social media follow?
Oh, jeez.
It doesn't have to be
Social
energy
media.
related or anything like that. It could be tech content,
Yeah, whatever.
blog, newsletter.
Could be Snoop Dogg. I don't care.
John's off the grid in Montana, so that
Yeah, I don't.
Yeah,
try
this
not
is
to
where
get
it
on
shows
too
my
much.
age a little bit.
We were just complaining
I would
about
say
social media
that,
yesterday.
Yeah.
I'm very torn on it because it's a very good source of interesting information if you follow the right people, but then it's a source of a lot of just dumb shit as well. So,
Yeah, I follow a lot
That's
of
just
like
it.
business people on Twitter, and I think those have been the most
Yeah.
valuable to me. Like even not technical business, even you have
Right.
like was it Nick Huber?
Nick Huber,
like,
yeah.
Startup, and so you have a few guys like that have a lot of great content they put out there. Girdley?
Yeah, Gurley's great too.
Every time they do, though, they all think that they're smarter than everybody else, and they get so arrogant sometimes.
Yeah.
It's hard to hear.
I appreciate Nick
There is a
Huber's
fine line
trolling
there.
though.
Yeah, that's right.
there's a line. I also, having now kind of been in that on the media side of it, I also am much more confident in like people that have big online presences. I do feel like a lot of them got there because they know how to kind of like play that game, and there is a certain online persona that got them there, and that person as a person is probably not the same as that persona at all, but the persona is what the internet wants, so they keep feeding it.
Well, did you see Nick Huber? Like he's got a
Oh, yeah,
media
for
team.
sure.
He
That's
spent $750,000 last year on his media presence. I mean,
yeah.
Wow,
One-
that's impressive.
or ridiculous. I don't know.
Let's do one more. Favorite database.
Oosh. That's a hard one.
Say,
Do we have to have a
I like
favorite?
MySQL. MySQL is so you can put it anywhere. It's so nice.
I'd say SQLite for that reason.
Yeah.
You can put it anywhere.
That's true too.
And
SQLite is
when you
good
bring up
like
SQLite,
that.
I got to bring up. Have you guys messed with DuckDB at all?
I haven't.
Bobby's still feeling
Come on, someone's got to. It's the SQLite for OLAP. Man.
Bobby just really wants someone to use it so that
Nice.
he knows whether he needs to start playing around with it or not. Or have you started messing with it?
I've messed with it here and there because
Have to
you
give it a
can make it
shot.
right. No, it's supposed to be super fast. I mean, you can run it anywhere in the browser, computer, cloud, whatever. But it's check it out if you haven't.
Yeah,
No, I will for sure.
no, will no. No, I will say Postgres though. I just like Postgres and how the community has rallied around it with
Yeah.
all of the different plugins and everything that exists. The scalability. It's just It's to me SQL Server is the Windows and Postgres is the Ubuntu. SQL Server does a lot of nice things for you out of the box. It makes things easy to get going, but like once you start scaling, it gets in your way left and right. And Postgres is the opposite. It does very little for you out of the box, but then once you get it optimized, then the sky's the limit.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
one of my coding bootcamp instructors told me, and it's kind of stuck with me, is like if you can't do it in Postgres, you probably shouldn't be doing it.
Yeah, it's pretty accurate.
It's a good
Exactly it.
good tidbit to end on. Guys, where can people find you, find the company? Find you on LinkedIn? Well, maybe not.
Well, yeah, we're everywhere, but welldatabase.com is what you want. We obviously showed our social media prowess here, but anyway, we are on the LinkedIn and the like, and but yeah, welldatabase.com, and you can find all of our information and hit us up directly. Ask any questions you want.
Yeah, they've got a
Yeah, we're
great
on Twitter. I'm
product.
on Twitter too, more than anywhere else.
What's your handle, Jeff?
What's Twitter? I thought it was X.
Sorry, X. Yeah, you're right. See, showing my age there. J Holt 456.
I just realized that's going to be another thing that like our kids
Yeah.
in like 10 years are, what are you talking about? What is Twitter? It's X.
Twitter.com still works.
Yeah, I mean, everyone's
It
going to
does,
call it
yeah.
Twitter for a
Yeah,
long time.
it does.
But,
Oh yeah.
Hey, for what it's worth, my kids won't call it X either. They keep calling it Twitter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They refuse.
yeah, no, go check it out. You guys have, I mean, free trials and free like features and stuff out of the box.
A free
right?
tier,
So,
right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
go play around with
Absolutely.
it. It's a great tool. Thank
Yeah,
you guys.
absolutely. Yeah, we are a real SaaS. You can sign up and you can actually get access without giving your freaking blood type or something.
Yeah.
Drop a
And
credit
not-
card
Useful
in, go to
insight
town, get
for
a trial.
free.
Yeah.
How about that?
And it's not one of the, you get a 7-day trial as long as you put in your credit card so that I can automatically charge you when you forget to cancel your trial scenarios too. They're great guys. So I appreciate you guys coming on.
Thanks for having us. I
Hey, not a
appreciate it.
problem. It's a pleasure.